Hi, and welcome to this week's Ask GMBN Tech Q&A clinic. If you've got any questions, get involved in the comments underneath there. If you're watching this for the first time, ask us questions. Use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech in the comments underneath. So if you need some help installing a headset or adjusting your front brake, whatever it is, don't be shy. Get involved down there and hit that subscribe button. At the same time, we've got content coming at you 4 times a week. It's all free. Give us a thumbs up while you're at it. Right, first question this week is from Tim Sadler. I swear, Tim, you love writing into us, don't you? I love it, fair play. Seems like a few riders have picked up Hayes brake sponsorship this season, Brendog for one. How about a catch-up? Has not seen much from them in a while. I'll tell you what, we'll save this for a show, but for those that don't know, I actually used a set of Hayes Dominion brakes on the YT Capra build I did, the one that you can see on screen that doesn't look like a YT Capra anymore because of the beautiful paint job on it. Now those brakes, I put them on, and I kind of picked them because of the fact there were a few things going on. I used to run the old Hayes HFX Mag brakes, which I loved, but they were plagued by issues, but they were kind of cool at the time. But these ones have got a bunch of new things going on. So the lever blade was carbon on these ones, and it feels nice. They're flip-flop design, which is great and convenient. But the caliper was really cool. So the caliper's got a couple of cool things. It's got twin bleed ports on there. So why would you want a twin bleed port? Well, to get the ultimate bleed, if you're struggling, you're guaranteed to be able to get any air out of the brake with a twin bleed port. But also means when you're servicing the caliper, it can be, if you actually open the caliper up, it can be immensely difficult to get the air out. With those, you're going to be able to get it through, and it's an option. I really like the fact it's there as an option. I think more brakes could actually do that. Also on the caliper mounting, where it goes onto the post mount, it has 2 little grub screws. So you know when you centralise your caliper, it can take you a while to figure it out, and as soon as you make any other adjustment, the other one will go out slightly. Well, once you've got this one perfectly centred, you put the grub screws in and it holds it in place. So even if you undo the main bolts, the caliper won't move. Love it. Real good, simple system. And for the record, the power was, I'd say, was up there with like that sort of grabby feel that you get on brakes on Maguras. I mean, again, that sort of feel is a personal preference thing. I know that some people don't like that feeling. I loved it, but it did take a little while to get used to it because I'm between Shimano and SRAM on all my bikes, and I've kind of got a setup where I feel comfortable on most bikes, swapping between them. But when you change something massively between bikes, you get on something with a brake that feels like that. It's a bit of a shock to the system, to be honest. Yeah, immensely powerful, and I'm sure we will be doing something with Hayes at some point. I'll ask him for some brakes so we can have a look at some different models. But yeah, nice to see someone asking about Hayes actually, instead of just all the regular brakes out there on the market. Next from Chris Rides MTB. I'd love to see more about suspension setup, what to look for in a ride. Okay, so it's not a specific question. I guess you're just asking us for content here. Well, this is great though. There's already a lot of videos, but I can always question my changes because I don't think I can ride 2 runs similar enough. And what I notice as a difference might be due to my riding more than the change setup. That's a really valid point actually. Yes, we've done loads of videos of setup, loads of videos explaining sag with both coil and air setups, explaining low and high speed compression, setting up volume spacers. And yeah, I get it. They'll tell you a base setting and we'll try and get you to sort of a happy point, but then you have to explore it from there. Yeah, I think there's probably a video we can do with what the changes actually mean out on the trail if you have too much or too little rebound damping or high speed rebound, for example, which is probably the more important one. Yeah, I'll have a think on that, but I think there is a video I'm sure we can make that will help you and other people out. Thanks for the suggestion, by the way. I wasn't expecting to read a suggestion as a question. Next one from Josh Donnelly, 04. I've recently got a pair of Clipless pedals, but I find unless I put the cleats under the ball of my foot hurts. Any advice? Okay, Clipless shoe right here. So the ball of your foot is kind of like, almost like the ball of your hand really. So it's kind of an efficient place to spread the weight out when you pedal. Now some people want to have the cleat further forwards and some people further backwards. Now technically, the further forwards you go, the more power you can put down through the pedal because you can engage your calf muscle as well as using your quads. Yeah, so that's a great thing, but it doesn't feel very good on a mountain bike. So you might see road riders, for example, having the cleat further forwards. Many mountain bikers want to have the cleat further backwards because the further forwards your foot is on the pedal, the more stable you are on that pedal rather than having a leverage using your muscle there. Yeah, and the downside to this is it's just not as efficient. However, the way it feels on a bike is great. Now, if you're moving to either of these, forwards or backwards, and it doesn't feel right to you, you're straining at any point, you could actually just be hurting your foot. which is not a good thing. Cycling shoes are supposed to support your foot to stop that. But still, if things are starting to hurt you, you probably want to stop that. Now, I know that Rich is making a video for us on the ergonomics of bike setup and all these sort of nuances. So look out for that one that's coming on GMBN Tech very soon. But yeah, I mean, you get common injuries with runners, you know, archway injuries, all foot-based injuries. It really is, and hotspots, I guess, from the cleat setup on your foot. It is really important to get it set up. I can't give you specific advice on where to put it. Just to add in one more thing there, it could be down to the actual shoe itself, the fit of the shoe, as well as the position of the cleat there. Now, some shoes, like, I mean, these are Anna's new gravel shoes that she hasn't seen yet, but they're gonna have a sole that's really efficient for pedaling, but perhaps not so comfortable for other things like walking, moving around. You know, it's based on the cycling, the pedal input. By chance, have you got a shoe that's more like cross-country biased? If so, that will be the same. It's focus on putting the power down and not so much on the comfort of your foot in the actual shoe. If that's the case, you might want to try some different insoles. That could make a significant difference to that. Okay, next up from Oliver Murdoch 4. Can fixing and servicing your bike too much damage your bike? Or is it simply bad technique? Because my bike constantly breaks and I service it the most out of my mates. You could be unlucky. It could literally be unlucky and you notice it more because of the fact you're a bit in tune with it, because you work on it. We've all got that one mate that doesn't fix anything, doesn't do anything, and everything works fine. And it's really annoying, isn't it, when it happens? There is a chance you've done a few things a little bit wrong or you've not quite mastered it. And there's also a chance that sometimes, I think I'm even guilty of this, of tuning things where you don't need to do it. Like, you don't need to adjust your gears unless your gears need adjusting, but some people feel the need to, oh, I'm just gonna twist my barrel adjuster, or, oh, it looks a bit out of whack, I'm just gonna screw in my low limit screw and then bugger up your gears. Yeah, some things don't need a lot of attention. You might just be unlucky. You can't service your bike too much though. You can over clean though. Now, I'll say this with one good example here. Drivetrains on your bikes. Yeah, so when you get a filthy dirty chain, you've got to clean it basically because you want to get all the horrible stuff out of the chain in order so when you put the lubricant on that chain, it does the lubricant job. You're not having a chain rotating around and all grit and stuff and wearing itself out. Now you get two types of degreasers. You get solvent-based and you get non-solvent-based. Solvent-based degreasers are what you imagine. They're really powerful and they're designed to literally melt the grease away. They're brilliant, but I'd say you probably don't want to use them too often on your chain because you're going to get, in the process of doing it, it's going to go on your bottom bracket bearings, it's probably going to go on your hub bearings as well. And then, hey presto, you've overwashed your bike because you're going to need to repack everything with grease or replace the bearings. So for something like your chain on a regular basis, probably use a non-solvent degreaser. So I reckon you're just a bit unlucky, or perhaps you're using maybe one or two things that aren't quite optimal for what you're doing. If you've got any more specifics, feel free to reply and we'll come back to you in the comments. Next up from Mr. Lewis McKinnon. How about doing something on specialised mountain bike tools? Which ones are worth having or which ones are better off leaving the bike shops to handle it? Good question. All right, so give me 2 seconds here just to magic up some tools, because we've got some tools here that you really don't need at home that are great for bike shops. Right, so this one, for example, is essentially like a headset press, but this is a suspension bearing kit. It's dedicated for pushing bearings in and out of bike frames. How often do you do that? Probably not that often, I'm guessing. If you need to do this annually, by all means, you can get one of these tools and be equipped to be able to do it. But is it worth you having one? I'm not sure it is. Perhaps if you have a cycling club or something like that, it might be worth chipping in on some of those tools that you want to have to learn and you know, do jobs like this. But you know, you're sharing the cost out amongst friends. The same would go for wheel jigs, for some bizarre tools. I mean, things like this, it's a disc brake pad spreader tool, but it's a pretty specific tool. Do you need that at home? Not sure you do. I love things like this. I've got all the tools, I love these things. You know, a lot of these are specialist tools for removing parts of bikes. These are for Fox forks. This is for a Fox X2 shock. These are for putting seals back in forks. They're all things that we tend to use fairly often working around bikes, but I'm not sure you need most of these tools when you're working at home. I'd say you need a chain splitter, a set of chain pliers, you need a decent set of Allen keys, a decent set of Torx keys. You probably need a soft-ended mallet or a rubber-ended mallet for working on a few things. 1 or 2 spanners. You'll probably need an 8mm spanner, maybe a 7 or 6, depending on what sort of brakes you've got to be able to do a few things there. You'll need a 14mm spanner if you've got older style pedals, or an 8mm Allen key, of course, to remove your pedals. Maybe a bleed kit and all this cleaning stuff for your bike. Other than that, you don't need too many tools. But there are some amazing tools out there. So I've just shown you this one, which is exclusive for suspension bearings. But you can also get one for hub bearings, and you guessed it, it's exactly the same in a different size with different size bits. In fact, this one's spanking new. Haven't even opened this one yet. But a headset one of these, of course, is exactly the same, but it's much, much bigger. Now you can use a headset bearing press, which you don't tend to use that much on modern bikes anymore. You can use those on butt brackets as well. As long as you have the right bits to make sure everything is aligned, it's still a press. You're still pressing things in and out. Again, we have to have the correct tools for what we're doing. We work with Parts Tool Direct. We've got the privilege of using all these brilliant tools. So it's only fitting that we use the correct tool for the job every time. But you don't necessarily need all this stuff at home. Try and figure out what jobs that you're capable of doing on a bike and get the tools. But I think as your abilities grow, you can add tools to the collection. I think that's kind of what we've all done all along. You know, I started off like everyone else with just a little Allen key multi-tool, and then suddenly I've got more tools and clothes. And so just something that happens, I guess, over the years. If you want us to do something on building a toolkit that you actually need and demonstrating how to use each particular tool, we're happy to do that. You could even do that on a kind of beginning, intermediate and sort of advanced level of what you actually need at home and what specific jobs you can do. Yeah, I could put that together, no worries. So could Anna. Let us know what you think down there. Next up from Pedro Torres, can you show us how to bleed Hope brakes and how to lube the pistons on the new Tech 4 E4? Okay, well, I made a video fairly recently on the fundamentals of bleeding any brake system. It was a bit about understanding how the system works, what the different fluids are. Some brakes you bleed top to bottom, some you do the opposite way around and stuff like that. So I'm actually going to throw the link to that video down there so you can check it out. And I actually bleed this brake in that video, which is a Hope Tech E4. But one thing I want to say with the Hope brakes is there's two ways you can bleed these. There's the older way, which yes, is very convenient, you don't need additional tools, where you would take this master cylinder cover off and you literally top up fluid, you open the bleed port, you push the fluid through using the lever, hold the lever closed, close the bleed port, release the lever, fluid goes down, top up the fluid, and then close it off basically when you're done. That works really well. However, it does take a bit longer and it can be a bit messy because you're applying the fluid directly to here. What I'd recommend doing if you've got those brakes is get the quick bleed kit. So this actually replaces that top part, and you have a cup that screws in, much like you would see on TRP brakes or Shimano brakes or any number of other brakes. It enables you to top this up rather than the actual reservoir directly, and then you can seal it off in the same way. Essentially, it just makes your life a lot easier. And yeah, all right, it is a little expensive having to buy a dedicated tool, but it's machined aluminium. It's pretty cool. And if you're asking this question, I'm guessing you like working on your bike, so that is something you want to get in there. But Hope brakes are dead easy to bleed. One of the easiest, in fact, because it's far more like bleeding a brake on a car or a motorbike or anything like that. Literally pouring fluid in the top, pushing it through the system, closing it, release. Okay, a question from Zachary now. I watched the video you made on repairing scratches to stanchion tubes, but I'm wondering how big does the scratch need to be to require patching? I've got a small nick from a rock that's probably only a couple of millimeters long and not terribly deep. Well, is it affecting the performance of your fork? If so, then yes, you probably want to do something about it. I would say the instance you want to do something about it straight away is have a feel. If it's got like a burr sticking off it, then you want to do something about it, because that every time it passes through the seals, and if it goes deep enough, if it passes through the bushes, you're scoring those. So that's when you're going to cause damage to the internals of the fork. If it feels really smooth and it is just that, you know, like almost like a dent on there, and it's not affecting anything, you're not losing air, you're not seeing anything, any dust and dirt being pulled into the fork seal there, then you're probably all right. I think you kind of just have to sort of, you know, follow your nose a bit there to see what you think is the best suggestion there. But yeah, give it a feel with your finger and make sure it's not sharp at all. I've been asked to make that video again actually, because there's a dedicated stanchion repair kit available. I've totally forgotten who it's by, but I want to buy one so I can actually use that again in the video. I haven't got a fork that's damaged, but I have got a seat post with a big gouge on it, so it's kind of the same thing, so I'm going to use it on that to hopefully repair it. Keep an eye out for that one on the channel at some point. Next up from ish_ula. When I build a new bike and I have to figure out new chain length, I always try and split the difference of the derailleur's 4.5 travel between highest and low gears, so the derailleur is not maxed out in either way. My question is, should I bias it more towards the biggest gears or the smallest gears? Does it have an effect on the drivetrain wear? I'm actually going to cheat this one out because I made a video on how you actually choose the correct length chain. Right, both SRAM and Shimano have slightly different methods of doing this for different speed chains. There is a formula to it, so you can actually get it perfect every time. And I'm going to throw a link to it on the screen. In fact, I'm going to throw a little excerpt of me talking in that video. Now, this point here, where you get the 90-degree bend in the chain, this is your 0 point, so you do not count this one. You count your measurement from this one onwards. So the first pivot, that counts as a link. So 1 link, 2 link, 3 link, 4 link, 5 link, and up to 6, as you can see. So that would be your 6th length. That's where you would split the chain. Obviously it's on a male and female one here, so you would actually take the chain off at that point and your quick link goes on the end. And that would be the correct length if it was the Shimano method. Okay, and that video of course will be down there as well, so you can be able to click on that and it's got the lengths printed on screen. So you can, it's like a cheat sheet. You can literally just go, oh yeah, I need to remove 2 links. Join it and off you go. Right, next question from VW Lee. Maybe address why you would use cup and cone washers when mounting brake calipers versus not. I've never seen anyone talk about it yet. I don't use them, but many do. Right, so you mean the little sort of top hat style spherical washers and brakes, I'm guessing. So some brakes use them, some don't. And essentially what they enable is you to fine tune the caliper, not only in side to side, backwards and forwards, but at an angle. So why is this a good thing? So once upon a time you would have had frames that are very badly faced, which meant where the holes are to mount the mounting bracket that the brake sat on top of, that could have been very slightly off in any number of ways. Now, a good mechanic who works in a bike shop will probably face those. Basically, facing means basically you're just machining, using a facing tool to make sure it's perfectly straight, like 90 degrees. And then in theory, you wouldn't need those hat washers to get that perfect alignment. Now, because we're using post mount on most bikes these days, you can't really mess that up. They're dead set, and you're not seeing those hat washers used on a lot of brakes now. But those hat washers also do have another job. They don't just enable this, they also just act as a washer to space the caliper to the right size. Now you might see that some brakes come in 200mm rotors, some come with 203, and the 203 ones sometimes will need those hat washers just to space them up a little bit. Now there's certainly no bad thing, but they're not essential, as you've pointed out. There we go, hopefully. And the next question is from Mike Freeman Photos. If a bike comes with an air shock, can I put a Coil-Shock on instead? And would it make much difference? Yes and no. And I've actually made this as a video as well. So there's 2 videos, one with me actually getting the shock installed on the bike and one with me doing back-to-back the coil versus the air. And it's kind of, elements of it are performance, but also elements of it are feel. One of the reasons you'd want to put a coil on is because of the feel it offers. Real nice grippy feeling on the back end of the bike. However, you've got to bear in mind that a Coil-Shock can physically be bigger than an air shock, and it might not fit through the linkage or the rocker system on your bike, depending how narrow it is, if it goes through the frame tube at all, you know, all those configurations. Some manufacturers will say straight out, not compatible with coil. That could be one of the reasons. The other reason, of course, is the back end of the bike. Now you've got to bear in mind that air shocks, by nature, when you compress air in a small chamber, is progressive. Coil-Shocks, the beauty of them, and also kind of the hindrance in this case, is the fact they're quite linear by nature. It means they're very consistent through their travel, they're very easy to adjust. The adjustments have a significant effect on what they do. But if you were to put a Coil-Shock on the back end of a bike that's very linear, that's designed to rely on the ramp up of a progressive air shock, you're going to end up with a bike that's going to be very easy for you to hit the bottom of travel all the time, and it'll probably sit a little bit low in the travel as well. You can get progressively wound coil springs, which will definitely get around this to an element, but they'll never be as progressive as an air shock on that bike. Now in this case, because you don't really know what your bike is here, can't make any recommendations, your best bet is to ask the manufacturer of your particular bike, hey, is it coil compatible? Now you will find on the spec sheets of most modern day bikes, they'll say straight out, hey, this works with coil and air. So it's up to you to choose. But for the most part, I'd say you can probably make a Coil-Shock work. But there's definitely some bikes out there that just categorically will not work, even if it fits in the frame physically. But definitely check before you commit to buying one. Expensive thing to buy, and you don't want to fit one on and go off a bump and find it actually sort of fouls part of the frame. I've heard of horror stories of people doing stuff like that. So there you go. Check the videos out I made on the Coil-Shock versus air shocks though, because they were really good fun to make. And I rode them for quite a long time, but actually on the particular bike I was using, I did go back to air in the end. But I know people locally that use that same bike and they've done the same and they're still on the coil and they prefer it that way.